you need to start thinking like tour players think. Like, they don't play. Tour players are complaining because they got to play too much, right? Like, they're trying to get more time. Parents are trying to make their kids play more. Like, they're doing the exact opposite of what the best players in the world want to do. And that's because I think that the best players know that you have to have a balance, okay? And it can't be all golf every weekend, every day. But two, if you want to continue to get better and you want to play at a higher level, you have to allow yourself time to work on things and develop, because it is a fact that you can't go perform and make a change at the same time.
Welcome to the Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. I'm your host, Ryan Adams, and today's guest is Tony Ruggiero. Tony has been consistently a Golf Magazine Top 100 instructor since 2017. He's also consistently been a Golf Digest Top 50 instructor since 2019. He was the host of the very successful Dew Sweeper radio show on PGA Tour Radio for 13 years, and now he's the host of the equally successful The Tour Coach podcast. He's coached numerous PGA, LPGA, and Korn Ferry Tour stars, including Lexi Thompson, Bill Haas, Sepp Straka, Andy Ogletree, and Lucas Glover. He also knows junior golf. He's personally coached 2 world number 1 juniors, a world number 1 amateur, and a U.S. amateur champion. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely looking forward to this. So glad we were able to find some time to work, and this will be good. Go talk about, I know we're going to spend some time talking about junior golf and kind of go down that road, and something I've been fortunate and been involved in it for a long time, probably too long. But anyways, it's been a passion of mine since I got started teaching. And, I've just kind of, I've always kind of stayed in that lane, no matter the other things that I've gotten into teaching and players and so forth. I've always stayed pretty heavily involved in developing junior talent and junior golfers. And it's something I'm pretty passionate about. And so looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, I mean, where are we at right now, Tony, like the state of the game when it comes on the professional level and the junior level? I mean, you've been involved for decades here, and you've seen a lot of transitions. Where would you say we are right now? Are we in a good place? Are we in a competitive place?
Well, we're for sure in a competitive place. Good would be, I think you could take that case by case. But in fairness, probably people like me or, and some of the things we've done were probably also guilty for maybe things having gone too far in some respects. I remember, early on teaching, and I mean, I think we've gotten to the point now where parents and junior golfers think of themselves like tour players, and they interview coaches like they're a tour player. I developed a lot of what I do from just some of the good players I worked with. I think I would say the first for sure great player I worked with as a junior was Bobby Wyatt, who went on to become the number 1 junior, number 1 amateur, and played on the Walker Cup and so forth. And then along came Robbie Shelton behind him, and coached both of them for really long times up to the tour. But a lot of what I did came from, I was just a local teacher, and, I started getting a name for myself, like lots of teachers out there, because you start teaching some good people. But, it was like I started adding the pieces to what I do and did based on the needs of what my really good player needed and wanted, and so, kind of, as that grew, I remember specifically being at the Players Championship, and I was sitting outside the front of the clubhouse there on the step where a bunch of teachers will sit while they're waiting for players to go in and all that. And I was just sitting out there, and I can't remember who I was watching, but I watched a player come, and he had a swing coach, he had a mental coach, he had a fitness guy with him, and he had an agent or whatever. And I was like, players have all these people. Like, why wouldn't we start offering under the same roof all of those components to junior golf. And I know some people had done that before. I mean, this is a pretty good while back, but like I started actively, this was back in, 11, 12 years ago. Colby Touye, who now is in Jupiter, and he trains DJ and Tiger, or Kepka, Tiger, and JT, and all these guys. And we had met through working with Smiley Kaufman, and Colby. So I invited Colby to start coming to my junior camps, and we were doing them in small places, and they were pretty inexpensive, and we did a bunch of them down at Bay Point, Panama City, and before the hurricane had hit them, and we would have 20 kids come, and we would have Colby there teaching them golf fitness and working with us, and then we invited Dr. Greg Carton, who's a mental coach on tour that I worked with. So we started exposing these juniors to mental and fitness coaches and putting a team around them, and I think that it's good exposing these kids to everything they need. I do think parents and people take things a bit too far, and they start thinking that their kid who's, won a couple local tournaments and finished 5th in an AJGA is the next coming of Tiger Woods, and I think what we need more than anything is a dose of reality and the ability to really tell parents like where their kid really is. I think people are scared to do that.
Yeah, the truth hurts sometimes, and oftentimes, yeah.
And look, if you're a young instructor, and we all need to make a living, right? I remember when I first got hired by Hank Johnson, my mentor, Sandestin. I mean, I was living in a place with no power. I tell the story all the time. I mean, I was starving, and so if anybody wanted to take a lesson, no matter how good they thought their kid was, what I was going to teach them, right? And I was for sure not going to tell the parent like kid's not that good. But, I think that we've got to start having honest conversations with parents. And I don't think it's the kids' fault at all, and I think there's a fine line between, I always tell folks there's a fine, I've never wanted to squash a person's dream, right? Because we've all seen people that weren't very good players in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, but get a chance to keep pursuing it and go. And then the light bulb goes off when they're a junior in college, or they're just out of college or whatever. And then they end up playing for a living and doing some cool things. Right. But I also think people also have to be realistic too, and understand that. And if I'm rambling on, just shut me up. But like I always tell this, there's this story that I think is a really good story for parents to hear. And I taught this kid, and he had become one of the top 2 or 3 JUCO players. He was at a small JUCO around here, and he was a good player. Like, he won a lot of their stuff, and he wasn't great at school, the schooling aspect of it. And he had some offers to go to, some Big 12, whatever, from where he knew he was either going to play golf or go work in the family business. And he had qualified for the USAM, and the USAM was up in Chicago at Olympia Fields. And at the time, I was working with Davis Riley and Robbie Shell, right? Both those guys played the tour now. And I had them play a practice round together so I could watch 9 holes. And I mean, they beat the dog shit out. I mean, it wasn't pretty, right? I mean, they were far surpassed him with length and all the stuff. And you could tell he was pretty dejected. And his dad actually said to me afterwards, why'd you do that? Right? And I said, well, your kid wants to play pro. These 2 guys probably are. He's got to figure out with his skill set how to beat those guys. And, now the guy's married. He's got a great job, and he plays a lot of mid-am golf. He's a super guy, right? But I think that was a wake-up call for him. And I think that, it's okay to be direct with people like that. And that's not telling you can't get there. And my job as a coach often is to take you and to like say, hey, with your skill set, we got to get really good at this or that to be able to play at the highest level. But I think we also need to have realistic, honest conversations with parents. And I don't think it's the kids' fault. I think it's the parents.
100%. I mean, it's for oftentimes, at least up to a certain age, it certainly seems like the parents are driving the ship. But Tony, you're uniquely positioned because you've been doing this for a long time. You've seen a lot of juniors. You've coached them. You've brought them up through the ranks. You've coached tour players. You've coached juniors. Like, what would you say is, how can you tell? Like, if you were to take 100 junior players and they're coming to one of your elite camps, and let's just say they're from the ages of maybe below 10 and then, 10 to 15, or like two different age groups. We got the young kids, we got the older kids. Like, how could you know? Are you looking at, distance, speed, like impact?
Let's start with the younger kids. Okay. So like, I don't deal with a ton of those anymore, right? Like I have people that teach with me and for me and stuff at places that do a lot of that. And just from a time perspective, like Morgan Hale, who's worked with me for a long time, and she's this summer the director of instruction up at the Creek Club on Long Island. She's done an amazing job with these younger kids. Like, I think it takes a lot of time and like
patience,
but like, especially like, you got to be around a bunch, right? Like, and and I got to the point with coaching those other players. I think you'll find that the people that there aren't many that can do both of those, developing the real young ones and then developing the older promising ones. That's just my opinion. It doesn't mean that there's nobody that's not good at both.
It makes sense. But Tony, let's just assume that you're walking in and you're watching 100 of these like younger juniors hitting the ball, and you're kind of just walking up and down the line. What would you be looking at then to be like, yeah, you know what? These five probably have a little bit better chance.
One, I mean, just physical ability. Like, you can watch a kid. I saw this kid not long ago that a young guy was giving a lesson to up in Philly. And like, the kid was pretty raw. Like, I'm not saying he hit a bunch of great shots, but when you filmed him and slowed it down, you could see he already knew how to load his body going back and how to rotate and unwind to deliver the club. Now, he may not have known how to put the face on it every time or, all that, but you could see the sequence on top. Like, well, you can't teach that, right? Then you'll see kids that, they just, don't have the same physical abilities. I think you can watch some young kids right away and see the way, like, you watch old videos of Rory, right? Like, they play those ones of him being a little kid. Like, you could tell the way he swam. That kid was different, right? And so, like, I look at how that early on, I look at their ability to move their body, like, like when they grab something and go to hit it, do they kind of already know how to deliver it with some rotation, right? Like, if kids do that, they pick up a club and they start doing that, they're ahead of everybody else. But when you get to the older kids and you walk on, like, the things I look for, like, I wish it wasn't the case. I wish speed wasn't as big a determinant nowadays, but it is. Me and you don't make the rules, and we don't make, so I think you look at speed. I taught a kid who was a good kid, played in the SC like me. He couldn't carry it at 260, like, right? And it would chase out. But like, the odds that kid is going to be good enough to play the tour aren't as good, right? I look at kids that when they get older, like, that are really good athletes. I love kids that have played a lot of other sports and been pretty good at them, right? I think they understand coaching. I think they understand what it takes to work at things. But I think those physical skills they pick up from playing other sports help them pick up golf better. But so when it comes to walking on a tee, like, obviously speed, you look at their ability. Like, there's kids that I teach this kid who's going to play at Colgate, and he's only been playing golf like maybe 2.5, 3 years seriously. mean, he hammers it. He was a hockey player up north, right? And he's decided after COVID, he loved golf, wanted to play. Like, I watched that kid hit a few, and you could tell by the sound and how he could compress it and how far he could hit it. Like, man, that kid could be good. Like, but there's a bunch of goofy stuff in there because he wasn't really taught, right? And you got to refine some movements. But, I think the cool thing about what we do and what has happened with golf and the money in golf and all of that stuff is that we're getting some kids that are great athletes that maybe would have picked other sports when they were if they were my age, right? Like they would have played football, basketball, baseball, tennis, something more. But now I think golf has become, we can give obviously Tiger a lot of the credit for it, but a lot of these other young guys, and with social media, the guys like Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth and, Smiley Kaufman, who I spent a bunch of time with, and like they're great on social media and they're very accessible to young people, and young people identify with them. And I think they've been wonderful for really good athletes deciding they'd like to play golf. I think that's a huge difference in what we do. I think we're getting kids that would have picked other stuff deciding, a kid before that might have just gone and he was a really good athlete, but maybe wasn't quite big enough that he'd have played at big-time college basketball, picks up golf and he can become a stud and he can play Division I golf and maybe go play for a living. I think we're just getting everything that's involved is giving us the opportunity to work with better athletes. And I think better athletes make all of us in my space, your space, better coaches, for sure.
So now we've got the athletes that are coming in, the better athletes entering into the game. And it sounds like you're definitely an advocate of playing multiple sports, really developing your overall athleticism. When would you suggest then a certain amount of specialization? Like what's that window where you're like, okay, you know what? There's always going to be those outliers, but for the vast majority, is it from like 10 to 14, 10 to 12? Like when would you advise that child to at least kind of, focus in on golf a little bit more if they really want to give themselves the best chance?
I mean, it's tough. That's the hard question. And I do think somewhere around high school to middle of high school, I think sometime around there, if you're going to want to play major Division I golf, I think you've got to make that choice that that's your priority. Now, I don't think that means that you can't still play on your high school basketball team or whatever, but I think you've got to decide that golf is your main deal and go, and if you're going to play at that level. And, we talked a little bit, is it good or bad? I mean, if we were saying what is bad is I think all these junior golf scoreboards and all these rankings and all these things that people focus on, make them give up playing other sports in sixth grade because they're trying to get their kid to be ranked. I mean, who the hell remembers who was the best fifth grader ever? You know what I'm saying? Do they all get together once a year or something? The best fifth graders of all time? I mean, no, they don't, but, but I think that these, and I think recruiting services are good and all, but I think they've put importance on things at an early age that in the end don't matter at all. I remember I had a kid who was in town and when I was working at Frederica and we went to Southern Soul Barbecue down the road there. Davis owns part of that. We took a kid in there and a bunch of tour players will hang out there. And anyways, Keith Mitchell was sitting in there having lunch. And that was just Keith, I think. And so we sat down with Keith and known him since way back in the Bobby Wyatt days. And this kid was talking about things and worrying about some of the scores. And he was in high school. And, Keith said, when I'm out on tour, he said, my whole job was, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was my job was from when I got there was at the end of each year, was I better than I was the year before? And when I got out of Georgia, was I good enough? Was I going to be good enough to do what I wanted to do? And he said, when we're all playing together, he said, when all of us Georgia players play together in a tournament or whatever, nobody ever goes, you remember that one tournament when you were a sophomore and you didn't qualify? Like, or you remember that tournament when you were in high school and you missed a cut? Like, nobody remembers it stuff. But parents and players get so wrapped. I mean, you see it, like they're so wrapped up in rankings and the scores they shoot right then and how important they are. And I think they miss that the real point is to be constantly getting better. And if you're always getting better, you're moving towards whatever your peak is, wherever that is. And you know, I think that I think some teachers put tons of importance on some of these future masters and stuff. And I've had kids win the future masters, and it's super cool. But it doesn't mean any of them are going to win the masters, you know? So I just, anyway, so I don't know that answered the question, but I think that we've created this culture, and teachers were partly responsible for it. And like, you know, the kids going to junior worlds with the teacher. Oh, what the hell are we doing? You know, I mean, if you're 10 years old, you should go to a golf tournament and play and have fun, right? Make sure you get a big hot dog at the end. I mean, you know, right? I mean, anyway, so I think some of it's gotten out of hand.
You're not wrong with that, and it certainly seems like it's undue pressure on a young mind, which is counterproductive to, you know, if the goal is to kind of give your child the best chance to succeed in anything in life, the last thing you want to do is be heaping on extra pressure that doesn't need to be there. For something like you're saying that doesn't really matter. Like, does it really matter if you win your grade 5, you know, championship? So a question to you then would be like, how much, so if a parent's trying to kind of walk this tightrope of, you know, making sure that golf stays fun, making sure that, you know, there's that old adage of putting in the 10,000 hours and trying to make sure that they're constantly working to get better. Like, how much tournament golf would you put a kid in? How would you help them kind of navigate the pressures of, you know, doing their best and making sure that they're trying, but also not taking it too seriously?
So let's start with schedule. I start with schedule, and I have this conversation I teach a family. All 3 of their kids are fantastic players, and one of them is committed to an ACC school. And but we had a conversation in the hitting bag, say 6 months ago. I said, you know, you need to start thinking like tour players think. Like, they don't play. Tour players are complaining because they got to play too much, right? Like, they're trying to get more time. Parents are trying to make their kids play more. Like, they're doing the exact opposite of what the best players in the world want to do. And that's because I think that the best players know that you have to have a balance, okay? And it can't be all golf every weekend, every day. But 2, if you want to continue to get better and you want to play at a higher level, you have to allow yourself time to work on things and develop, because it is a fact that you can't go perform and make a change at the same time. It's extremely difficult, right? And, you know, when you go do something and you care about the outcome and you swing heavy club in the ball and you do that, like, you're going to do what you've always done or what you do, right? Like, so you have to give yourself time to change movement patterns, to learn new things, and to work on it. And whether it's full swing, short game, putting, or whatever. And so if every week is a golf tournament, I mean, how are you allowing your junior, your kid to develop? And so I think, you know, I encourage parents, like, you know, you have to pick a season where there's some downtime. I mean, 1, you got to let them be a kid. But 2, they've got to have time to work on their game. They got to have time to work on their bodies and do golf fitness and do specific things for that. And they've also got to have some time off to go do some other stuff that they like to do and have fun and be normal. And I mean, that would be a big thing. I tell them, like, and that's what tour players are trying to do. And when you watch some of the young players that come out and they don't have status and they just have to play tons of stuff, they struggle. because they don't have time to work on it, right? I mean, look at a college season. You play 8, 9 tournaments a year in a college season, right? And then they play, they probably play 5, 6, 7 other amateur events, right? The best players, and so, so that's, you're talking 18 events over a year or 20 events over a year. And you see juniors that are playing 30, 35 tournaments. It's insane,
Hmm.
So
And you're not seeing that translating to more success down the road with these juniors because of exactly what you're saying, which is you're not giving the kids enough time to kind of decompress from the tournament, realize what they need to work on, give them a couple of weeks or months to kind of tune back up their game, and then get back out there. And I'm also assuming, we're assuming that the child is doing well in the tournaments. If they're not, and they're just getting their teeth kicked in, as you alluded to before, then that's going to have a profound impact on their confidence and their psychological well-being of whether or not they can actually do it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, there's another piece of this puzzle that parents and kids have to understand is that so we're talking about an age group that kids go through huge physical changes in their body, right? And I've never taught a kid, even all the ones that I've taught that have turned out really, really good, right? I think I've had 3 kids play on the Walker Cup and never seen any of them that when they went through those big growth spurts in their teens, they played worth a damn during those growth spurts. I mean, their body's changing every day, they feel different, and then hormonal changes. You have to look at all, there's so much change going on that it's a tough time. And then we're trying to play them 30 times, and evaluate each round, how they're doing. And I think parents need to understand that, sometimes a kid, when we put them on that swing catalyst and we film them and slow them down, or we go out until you watch it, the ball flight's way better and it's different, but their scoring's not better. Sometimes they're just in a growth spurt. They're just going through a little downtime. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with them. Doesn't mean the person they're working with or the program they're working with, I mean, I've had people bring me a kid that was real talented, and I'll be like, well, why are you bringing them to me? Kids are good. Well, you've had more success with better players. I was like, well, is the kid not getting better? Is he not done stuff? Why are you wanting to change? Well, in the last, 3, 4 months, he hadn't played that good. Well, he's grown. He's going through a growth spurt. You need to stick with who the guy or girl you're working with. And I think that, and I think that would serve people well too. And I'm not saying I haven't benefited from people bringing kids to me because I've had success. But I also am honest with parents. If the kids get better, there's no reason to change. You look at Randy Smith and Scotty Scheffler, right? And he did the same thing with Justin Leonard, and he did the same thing but the continuity of being with one person. If you get somebody with somebody really good, the continuity of them being there for a long period of time. And as you know, coaching a person from that young age, high school through college, to play in the tour is a very important relationship. And you have a lot of influence and impact on them as a person, much less a golfer. And I think that parents need to be careful with that selection process, right? And then just moving a kid from person to person because they think this person's going to have more success or whatever. I think the end result.
How would you help Tony, a parent to kind of choose? If you were to rank the 3 most important things when choosing a coach during those pivotal transition years from high school through college, or before, what would you do to look for in an ideal coach?
Well, so let's just say you've got a kid that's 13, 14, he's never had much serious instruction, but he's got an aptitude for it. You can tell he loves, Randy Smith told me one time on my old radio show, and I've used it ever since. And I tell him I stole it, but when is the time to get your kid really good instruction? That's when you go to the golf course with them, and when you leave, they want to stay. I mean, as simple as it gets, right? And so when your kid is at that point where they're wanting to go to the golf course, even if it's not with you, they just want to go and they want to stay past when you're there. And I think I think the first thing I always say this, like, look in your area, and it's not hard to find, but like, look in your area and find out who's had the most success over a period of time developing good junior players. And you can ask around, you can find that. You can probably Google it nowadays, right? But you can for sure find that information. You can ask other junior golfers' parents, right? That's what I would start. I would go to somebody. I would go to somebody who's had success developing young people, because I do think it's a talent. I do think there's a knack to it. And, I think there's guys that, are great teachers. Butch Harmon's the greatest teacher of all time, right? He's my idol. But like, that probably wouldn't be who you would take a 15-year-old one, like, probably wouldn't be accessible as you need. Might be cost prohibitive, like all of those things, right? Like, you got to look at the whole package when you're picking a coach. Like, who's done the best in your area. And then I think you go meet them and you take a golf lesson and you see if the kid clicks and likes them. I think that's the thing that gets overlooked. Like, does the kid like spending time with the coach? And, if you've got 2 or 3 coaches in the area that are good and they both had fairly close success and all that, and your kid gravitates more to one than the other, that's who ought to coach, because they're going to spend a bunch of time with them. And as parents, we don't like to hear this, but there's going to be times where they trust the coach and like being with the coach more than they like being with us, right? I traveled a lot of places in this country with Bobby Wyatt. I probably spent as much time with him, and I traveled to a Walker Cup with Robbie Shelton in England. Travel and you spend a lot of time with them. That relationship becomes close. And I think I know for me, some of those relationships that I've had with those players are the most important relationships I've ever had in my life. Bobby Wyatt still stops by every Christmas, stops and has a drink with me at my house. That's one of the coolest things that happens every year. There's some cool moments from those relationships. And I think that on the front end, you need to be careful with how you pick those people, because they have tremendous influence on the young person.
And we're not just talking about a physical swing mechanics. You're talking also like mental and emotional impact on the players and their development. Life, yeah.
I had a kid who recently won a club championship, and this is one of the funniest stories of all time. His brother played at Alabama too. He could have played college golf, but he wanted to go to Alabama just to go to school. And anyways, he won a state high school championship. Super good dude. We laugh about this all the time. Like, he booked a lesson with me, and I get there. I'm like, hey, what? He goes, man, I need you to help me write a text to my girlfriend I'm trying to break up with. So, that's your lesson? He goes, yeah, man, like, you're great at talking and writing stuff, and you've known me. And we wrote this text to this girl, and I showed him how to dump her without her getting too mad at him and leaving the door open in case he decided he wanted, right? But
those are life skills.
Right. But there's lots of things that we talk about with young people growing up that aren't your pivot, your swing plane, and all that, right? And I think that gets overlooked. And you obviously have to be very adept at developing players and understanding the golf swing. But I think the other stuff gets overlooked in its importance to developing. And you asked a little bit ago, we talked about, like, how do you know? I can tell by the questions a player asks how good they're going to be for the most part. How in tune they are with their feels during the lesson, their first lesson, how good they're going to be. I think great players know that they're different. And they may not say that to you. And some say it, and it sounds more arrogant than others, but I think people that are really gifted and really good know they're different. And I think they also have a real good idea what they're looking for. And I think our job as parents is to help them match with the right person, you know?
How do we help develop? So let's just assume then we have a kid that is special, that knows that they're special, knows kind of what they want, they're dialed in. How on the mental side, how do we help kind of guide and nurture and give them those mental skills to overcome the inevitable disappointments in a round, in a tournament, helping them kind of have that killer instinct when they need it, to just all the things like what's important on a mental side, would you say, to have, and how do we help develop that?
I think, so look, one of my pet peeves is people that call themselves mental and performance coaches that basically just call themselves that. And I don't know that it matters if somebody my age takes an online thing from an online mental coach doing seminars, and you probably can't mess me up any worse than I am. But I think if you're dealing with young people, we touched on all of the changes that go on physically, and the hormonal and the emotional changes and they're way even more powerful. And some of the things that kids are dealing with today, I think that if you're coaching and teaching and developing young people, you need to be able to offer access to somebody, not like where they're with you, but like you need to have a relationship with somebody that you can get them with that is trained, that is a doctor that's trained to deal with people at that age. I've unfortunately, I've had kids go through some, pretty tough stuff that would be way beyond me telling them it's going to work out or whatever. And, you get these people that just tell everybody, oh, be positive. And, if you do a better routine, that's going to fix all the shit in your life. Well, sometimes it doesn't fix that the dad's beating the hell out of the mom, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the type of stuff we run into in society, or that the pressure that the kid knows that the mom and dad don't have very much money and they're spending it all on the kid to try to make him good at golf. That's an enormous amount of pressure. And when the kid starts to talk about that, you got to help them get with somebody that can help them deal with it, because there's huge long-term effects. So I'm big, because I've known people, I see people and all of a sudden they call themselves a mental coach. And I never involve anybody with my juniors on the mental side that's not a doctor, because I think we owe it to them to do that, to make sure. If we've talked about what's important in finding the coach and how important that relationship is, that one's even bigger, right? And so I think that's something we need to be prepared to do.
What have you seen kind of separates those tour players you've worked with their mentality? Like how do they get over specifically, so life is one thing, and there's no doubt that life bleeds through to your performance on the course. I was actually I just did a podcast with Matt Thurmond, the head coach of ASU, and he answered the question as to what he saw with all the great players that he's worked with. And he didn't think that he would answer the question this way, but he said actually a stable relationship in their life was one of the most important things for on-course success. Having a stable partnership, friend group, or, a girlfriend or boyfriend. And so I'm kind of curious on your side, what have you seen them from the mental kind of state or the mental skills that the top tour guys that you work with or juniors seem to have that maybe others don't?
So I think the one quality that the very best have, and I think this goes for players and coaches, is the ability to look in the mirror and when things don't go well, accept responsibility themselves. The biggest turnoff for me as a coach when meeting a player is when, everything that's not gone right was somebody else's fault. This guy didn't teach me this enough, or I just, I always get a bad break, or, whatever it is, right? Like, I think the ability to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself is what the best players in the world do. Now, I think they also have very short memories, the very best players. And I think the very best players enjoy being uncomfortable, and they enjoy the opportunity to fail and understand that failure. I think the best players understand that failure isn't permanent. And I think the ones that are on that fringe could be good. You don't know. They're afraid to fail because then they think that that'll have meant they're not good enough, right? I think the ones I said earlier, I think the very best are different, and they know they're different. And I think they know that if they fail, that doesn't mean they're not great. And I've got some players that are really, really good and that are great, but don't necessarily believe they're great. And it for sure keeps them from getting to where they're trying to go. Now, I think players can develop that skill set, because I think you could play on the PGA Tour and be unbelievably good and be what we would all call a great golfer. But if you're wanting to say, what are the best of the best, the great players, the top 100 players in the world, top 100 players in the world are different. And they know they're different. Some of them cover it up better. I also would say this, and there'll be people who get pissed at this, but the very best are extremely self-centered. Some of them do an unbelievable job at making you think they're not, and in public not being that way. But the very best players in the world and the very best at what they do are self-centered. They have to be. I think they have to be. And, and I think you can see that in them when they're growing up. Some of them are nicer than others, but you can tell. I mean, and I know that's one of those odd questions. People are like, how you can tell? But you can tell when a kid gets it. You can tell when a kid knows he's different and better than everybody else. I know that probably doesn't answer many people's questions. But
no, it does, and it tracks because as you start having these conversations, you start noticing patterns, and that seems to be one of them. With all the greats from any sport, there is a selfishness that is there, that they are on a mission to be the best that they can be. And that unfortunately means that other things take the back seat. It seems to be a prerequisite, like you're alluding to.
But see, and I don't want to interrupt, but goes back to the importance of parenting, right? Because I think the ones that are parented the best have the ability to understand that they're different and they're driven, but they can still treat the people around them with respect, right? I think the ones where the parents, all they do is just tell their kid how good they are, and it's everybody else's fault when they don't. They may be great, but those are the ones that treat everybody, right? And I think nowadays, with all of the social media and everybody's got access to you 24/7, how you are as a person, I think, is even more important, because people you can't go anywhere without somebody having a phone, snatching a video,
you can't hide it.
Right?
You can't hide it.
Right. So you have to be careful. So I think it's even more important now how parents raise their kids and teach them with respect. We all talk about how great Scotty Scheffler is. His parents ought to do a class for junior golfers. And the best thing he says is that, how he plays and what he shoots and whether he wins or not is no determinant about how they feel about him and how they're going to treat him and what and what he's going to be when he comes home. And there's a lot of junior golfers that don't feel that way, that don't feel like if they play bad, they're treated the same way. And I would tell every parent that if your kid can tell the difference in you based on how they play, you're doing a shitty job. And you need to check yourself and figure that out. And I think that's a huge deal.
What else can we do as parents to set our kids up for success?
I think, again, I mean, I'm a parent, and I'm also one that tells you, like, there's been things I've done that I haven't done very well, right? My daughter, Abby, is 29, and, her mom and I are divorced, but for a chunk of her life, as I was off doing all this stuff, which is why you asked me to be on a podcast, I probably wasn't as present as I should have been, or I need to be, and we joke and laugh. I have big regrets about all that, but now her and I are like, she's my best friend, right? We're insanely close. But, I think the thing we got to do as parents is like, you give them opportunities to do what they want, and you surround them with the people that are the best that you have the ability to do. And then I think you have to let it be their decision whether they want to be good. The ones where you see the parents of the kids and it's on a train track to disaster are the ones where anybody, you or I, could sit there drinking a beer off on the side and know that the kid doesn't want it. It's the parent. I think it goes back to what Randy Smith said. Like the kid, it's got to be the kid. No matter how much you want it for your kid, and how cool you think it would be, and no matter how much, you may be right, the kid may have the most ability of anybody we've ever seen, but if he doesn't want to do that, in the end, he's not going to be successful. It's got to be their dream, and it's got to be their mission. And we touched on those people that are, that are freaks. It's their deal, and they know that's what they want to do. And I think that's what we're. And so, like, advice to parents, let it be your kid's deal. And, Greg Carden's always like, regardless of what your kid shot, when they come home, don't ask them what they shot. Did you have fun? I love you. You want to go do what, whatever. Like, and I think that the more you're like that, the kid's got to, I think the less pressure you put on, the better chance they got to perform, for sure.
Tony, you're a powerhouse when it comes to the world of golf, and you're out there with your YouTube channel, with your elite golf academies, with your great podcast, The Tour Coach. If people want to get in a better, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to work with you, if they want to kind of get exposed to a lot of the truth that you talk about all the time, what's the best way for them to find you?
I think the best. And I can't believe I'm saying this. My mentor will be rolling over in his grave right now. But like, go to our YouTube channel. Like, we really made an effort. Like, I don't know, this past year, I was just watching all the stuff put out. And I was like, you know what? Like let's start putting out stuff that, like, I think's really good instruction, but like, doesn't look canned. Doesn't look like, and I think this from having listened to me and talking. Like, I mean, listening to this is like what I'm like if we went to an Italian joint down the road and we broke open a couple bottles of wine and ate some pies. Like, I want you to know me and I want to be authentic. I don't ever want somebody to say, meet me or having dinner with me or taking a lesson with me was different than whatever. And that was my goal. So we put out a bunch of content on YouTube, on Dew Sweeper TV. And, some of it's longer form where we put these episodes out called Pro Work, where it's me and maybe it's Colby or Greg Carton or Mark Hackett or whoever, Wayne Flint, Jackson Court, Morgan, whatever, working with a student. And sometimes we had a guy on there, Fred, and you shoot 88, and we got him to where he shot in the mid 70s over a course of a year. And it was a look at his lesson, like how he worked and what he did. And now he did all the work. He spent more money than I would have on it, but he did the work, right? but like, you know, and then we've had one with a really good junior, a girl that played at Duke that's a great player. Like, you know, like their inside looks. I always say it's a real inside look at what I think really good developmental instruction is. So I think and we've tried to put out good stuff, and also we talked about this before coming on the air. Like, you know, the radio stuff was cool, but nowadays through doing this type of stuff and put stuff on YouTube, you can let people know you a little more, and you can think outside the box. Like, I came up with this crazy idea drinking beer one day down in Key West that I wanted to teach my fishing guide how to golf and him to teach me how to fish and film it and show people. And everybody's like, that's the dumbest thing. I'm like, well, it's coming out. So like, I think it's cool. Now it'll probably completely flop and nobody will watch it, but like, I think it's cool. But like, you know, all of the mediums out there like this give us the opportunity to express things and try things and not be afraid of failure. Right. Like, you know, and that was a tough one for me. Like, I was always afraid to fail at things, and I was very worried early on in my career what people thought of me, right? And then you get to a point where you like, it's okay to like, hey, the things I've done are good enough for me, right? You know, and accept who you are, and it's okay to enjoy some of those things and some of the things you accomplish, and decide that you want to do some creative things. Like, so it's been fun for me. So long story. I know I drug that on for 4 minutes, whatever, but you know,
not at all. You're dropping truth bombs.
Do Sweeper TV. And then I would tell you Instagram. Like, I started with Instagram to keep an eye on my daughter, see what the hell she was up to. Right. I never thought of it as a business deal, but like, it's between that and YouTube, it's become a powerful way to communicate with young people. Right. And, you know, my favorite thing is putting what I call good music, which was made before the year 1995, right? And put good music up there and make the kids listening to it in their music videos, in their swing videos, right? But like, you know, it allows you to express yourself. And I think the more we can allow as teachers, you know, young people and people learning to really know us and know who we are, I think it's a good thing, right? And I think one of the problems, and then I'm totally done, wrap it up, like with social media, is everybody only sees people when they win, right? And Greg Carton and I were saying this, like, there's a teacher out there that only posted like every day. It was only when somebody wins, right? Like, never post like, I want to go on there and post like, every one of my guys this week missed the cut. I suck. Right? Like, because it happens.
Authentic, yeah.
But like, teachers and parents and players only see the guy on Instagram you're putting up that won or that striped it. They don't see the guy or the girl that's struggled for 3 months and shot awful rounds, but is starting to play better and see that glimmer of hope. Because that's what you and I see, right? And so to me, if we could showcase in some of this content that it is a process and that people suck sometimes and that it's okay to fail. And if anybody gets it, you know, I think one of the best podcasts I've done ever was after Grayson Murray passed away, right? And I spent a good bit of time with Grayson over a couple of years. And you know, it was like if we had his best friend, Noah, on there and Dr. Carton, and it was like, you know, so this isn't going to be the cheery, everybody sitting around drinking wine podcast, but like, it was a discussion that needed to be had. And if it helped anybody, we did a hell of a job with that 45 minutes, right? And, you know, and I think, you know, the same thing with the other stuff we put out. If it helps somebody, great. And if we enjoy it and have a good time, it's great. But I want people to see real life, real golf instruction, and real development.
Tony, your joy and your love and your authenticity is infectious, and it's hard to deny. I really appreciate you doing this, and thank you.
No, I appreciate you taking the time and doing this, and I think that like junior golf and shedding the light on it. Like, I had this conversation with somebody once about writing a book, and they're like, it'd be great information, everybody needs it, but it won't sell a lot, right? Like, so people shy away from doing some of these things that are really need to be out there because it's like, it's just not that mark. Like, you know, we won't make $10,000 on it, but like, this is the content and the stuff people need, because that's the next generation. And, you know, I'm like everybody. Like, I think the beer used to be colder back when I was growing up, and things used to be better,
Yeah.
right?
Music's
like,
better. Yeah.
Yeah, everything, right? But like what you're doing is great for golf. But more important than golf, it's great for parents and for young people. They've got to, they've got to be able to find some answers to it, and not just watching everybody that's playing good isn't always the answer.
There certainly seems to be an awakening that's happening. And that's part of it, is parents becoming more conscious and intentional about what they're actually doing and what that downstream effect is going to have on their kids. And, you know, the beautiful game of golf, I mean, any of us that play it, we know it is a microcosm of life. The ups and downs, the mental, like everything, it's in those 18 holes. And if you can use that as a vehicle to help raise good humans and to kind of arm your children with all the skill sets that they need to be successful in whatever they decide to do. If it's golf, amazing. If they're one of those very few, lucky few, but no matter what, if you do it properly and you use golf as this vehicle to teach your kids and for you to become a better parent and the best that you can be, then I think no matter what, it's a win-win. So
100%. Yeah. And I've fired kids who weren't good humans, right? And they weren't good people to be around. Like, and I think that as people, like, it's okay to tell people no. You know what? Like, that, just because you're good at it, that doesn't fly, right? And I think that stuff like the stuff you're putting out, I mean, it's valuable, because at some point people got to understand that you can be told no. It's okay, you know? And, you know, and I mean, I think that's valuable, and there's a real value to that, and you're doing some great stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to have me on and let me ramble for an hour.
This will be one of many. Tony, you're a good human. Thank you again. I appreciate you.
Absolutely appreciate you. Look forward to talking again. Thanks.